So hello and welcome to the next installment of the 30-minute workout webinar series. My name is Angel Espinoza and I'm an Autodesk infrastructure technical specialist. Today I'm joined by my colleagues Jeff Bartles, Jerry Bartles, and Alan Gilbert. In today's session, we will look at drawing maintenance, a key to success. And ultimately, why this is so very critical for users and organizations. For those of you that are not familiar with the concept of the 30-minute workout webinar series, we attempt to address capabilities beyond the typical need-to-know training. Because it's not always possible to cover everything in training, this webinar series intends to show tips, tricks, and lesser-known tools and features that some people never learn about, or would learn after a significant amount of use. This way you can make the most of your Autodesk investment. Now, in today's session, in the case of today's session, some of you have heard about these commands. I'm quite confident of that. But unfortunately, we're finding that not everyone utilizes these capabilities as often as they should. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. As far as ground rules, examples are typically abstract in nature to focus on the functionality. Once you learn how the capability works, of course, you can apply it in many different situations. We commonly start on time and end on time. We try to honor your valuable presence. If for some reason you're unable to watch the series live, know that all sessions are recorded, and anyone that registers for a session can view the recording at their convenience. This may also minimize your need to take notes. If you have any questions during the session, please type those in the question and answer pane. So there's two panes at the bottom, one question and answer, and one chat. Jeff, Jerry, and Alan will attempt to address as many of the questions in the question and answer pane as possible. I may address unanswered questions at the end if time allows. If we are unable to address all questions during the session, someone will get back to you with an answer. If you would like to have a one-on-one follow-up call with one of us about a topic that was covered in a session, please type that in the chat pane. We always look forward to chatting with people. Okay, now for today's agenda. We will begin by understanding why it's so important to do drawing maintenance. If you think of a drawing similar to an automobile, in the past, when I first learned AutoCAD back in the late 80s, drawings were typically just made up of text, lines, arcs, polylines perhaps, maybe a few dimensions. But now, like modern day vehicles and automobiles, they become much more complex. And drawings have gone up, project sizes have gone up, and inside of drawings, we commonly have quite a number of potential references, things like X references, data references, images, point clouds. GIS data are all commonly added to drawings nowadays. This means that more things have to be configured absolutely correctly. And with more of these types of data, that means more complexity and more that has the potential to go wrong. And kind of the rule of entropy, if we don't do proper maintenance, entropy says left unchecked, disorder increases over time. So there's more likelihood for things to go wrong. What we will be discussing today will be from a particular PDF. Now, Marina will be placing a link to that PDF in the chat window. I'm going to drag this PDF over onto my screen at the moment and talk about this just briefly. So this PDF was created by the Customer Success Organization, and they interact with quite a number of different of our customers. And what they found is that even though people know of some of these things, they're not always implementing them as often as they should. So we're going to be talking about some of the things that they found are very important for people to do and why. So at the very top of this, there's this whole discussion about drawing maintenance and keeping drawings free of extra objects or how to fix corruptions and so forth. And then there's commands here, which I'll be covering as a part of the session today. Additionally, I'll be mentioning a few things that are not part of the document, but I'll point that out when we get there. So in continuing, we understand that files can also get bloated. And what I mean by that is sometimes we find that files have duplicate objects. And that's like carrying an extra engine strapped to the hood of your car or to the top, an extra set of tires. ultimately you're getting less mileage out of your vehicle. It's less efficient. And that's the exact same thing that happens with drawings. When we have too much stuff that's not needed, ultimately things like opening a file, closing a file, saving a file, particularly if you're saving it to the cloud, it just takes longer, right? With upload speeds and download speeds, ultimately it takes longer, which means, as we know, time is money, and that means that we're wasting money in the end. And with more complexity, as I've already mentioned, the potential for more corruption and what it takes to fix corruptions and the time and the money it takes to do so, again, is just lost productivity, lost efficiency. So all of these things add to the bottom line of any organization, no matter how big or how small. So we want to make sure that we try to do as much as possible to eliminate that. So what we'll be doing today is talking about some of the maintenance commands. Some of them are obvious, some of them less so. We'll start with, similar to the document, the overkill command. We'll talk about the purge command and its related command, dash purge, a little bit about why there's two and how they're differ. And then another command that's related to that is a system variable called xref registry application control. So this is the system variable itself, and I'll run that in just a bit. We'll talk about the audit command, which is similar to taking your drawing. If you were taking your car to an expert mechanic, it's taking your drawing to an expert mechanic in order to get it fixed. Now, there are times where you can't open your drawing, just like you can't drive your car to the mechanic. And in those situations, we'll talk about the recover command. So it's a little bit different, but similar to audit, but used in a different scenario. Now, with both of those, there is a potential for the audit to find and fix things, in which case we have to run this clear phantom parcels command. We'll talk briefly about that and what it does when I get there. We'll talk about map clean, which is different than overkill. We'll chat about that. Some additional actions and tools that also are going to be possible. For people that interact with the cloud, they commonly have the desktop connector installed. We'll talk about a tool within the desktop connector called the reference manager. And as always, in keeping with tradition, this is my last slide until we get to the very end. So this session will attempt to be as PowerPoint free as possible with live in product until the recap at the end. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump over to Civil 3D. Okay, so in Civil 3D, I have a very simple drawing. Pardon me, I'm going to remove just a couple things off my side screen here. I like to make things a little bit cleaner for myself. There we are. So I already talked about the PDF. So as I maneuver, in the past, I used to have a digitizing tablet, a digitizing board, tablet 12 by 12, and then went to a digitizing board, which was, I think, 2 feet by 3 feet. And I had custom commands and things already pre-configured, so I just click on them. I'm doing something somewhat similar here with the tool palette. I'll just run through some of these commands from top to bottom. So it was very common for me to have a view restore A, which I called view restore all, in which case I could get to the entire drawing that was important to me. And then I have quadrant 1 and quadrant 2, quadrant 3, quadrant 4, and maybe the center of the file there altogether. But what I very commonly didn't do, because I had these commands configured, was a zoom extents. So if I zoom extents, this happens to people. It's not uncommon. Suddenly it's like, wow, there's something out there, either because I did a move command or a copy command incorrectly. Something can just fly out into space and we end up with things out there, and we want to make sure we get rid of them. So what I'm going to do is just, I zoomed out a little bit. I can see a little dot right there, but I'm just going to grab a big window to see if there's anything else out there, maybe even a bigger window. Make sure that there's nothing out there. And it's telling me that there's 5 objects out here, my quick properties. So what I'm going to do is just to take a look at them, I'm going to place them in the object viewer, and I can see that it says, oh, this is junk. There's some items down there. So I'm going to go ahead and set that as my view and get out of the object viewer. And now I'm looking at that junk, right? So I'm going to grab it. I tend to like to do things just with my right mouse click. So I'm going to go ahead and choose the erase right off of that. And then come back, do the zoom extents, or double click the middle mouse wheel, whichever you prefer. And now I can see that the zoom extents is in fact showing me just the area of the drawing itself. So finding these extraneous objects can be a rather important and necessary thing. Now, what I'm going to do is next, I'm going to divide up the window in 2. So let's viewport configuration. I'm going to vertically divide that in 2. And on one of these, I'm going to turn it on its side. Now, I can't tell you how frequently this occurs, that when we turn something on its side, suddenly, wait, things are not as expected. Things are, in fact, if I were to come to a front view, it's like, wow, there's things in not just a singular plane. Maybe everything is supposed to be down at 0. Maybe everything is supposed to be up at the project elevation. And sometimes we find geometry that extends from the project elevation down to 0. In this scenario, all of these things should be down at 0. So what I'm going to do, and I'm going to talk about a command called flatten. Now, for those of you that are unfamiliar with flatten, I'm going to type it first and then point out how you can find where it is. I'm going to type in flatten and then hit the help for that. So as it comes up, flatten, now you can say find. So as I move this down and hit find, and what it's going to do is it's going to jump over to the Express Tools palette, and then under the modify panel, there's flatten objects. So again, if I come back over here to home, and I'll move my help out of the way. If I come over here to help, it said to the home, it said go to Express Tools, go to the modify, drop that down, and there's flatten objects. Now, if I hover on that, of course, I get the tooltip that tells me what it does. It says converts 3D geometry to 2D geometry. So I'm going to use that command, and I'm going to use it on these objects right here. Now, I'm going to go ahead and select them and hit a return. To remove heading objects, I'll say no, and then allow this to run. Now, notice, I expect that there's 4 objects there, the rectangle at the top, the rectangle at the bottom, and the 2 lines in between that are connecting it. But this is taking a significant amount of time to flatten what I believe is only 4 objects. But in reality, there are many more than 4 objects, which we'll find out exactly how many in just a moment. And this is the type of example of what happens when we have extra information in our files that are not needed, not necessary, or inappropriate, right? So that took a significant amount of time. Now, if I just happen to click in here, just on that area, what I want is my, it appeared on my other screen, so I'm going to drag it over here. My quick properties will tell me that's in fact 1,155 objects right there. So whatever that is, maybe it's line segments or 1,155 copies of the exact same rectangle, that could be a problem, and it's causing my drawing to behave slower than it should. So things like the following command, which is the overkill command, is exactly why we need to do things like this. The overkill is because we have objects that are in the drawing that shouldn't be. Now, overkill has lots of different capabilities. We can see some of these options down here at the bottom, which include things like combining linear objects or things that are end to end. And actually, I want to point out right here, this arc is actually made up of several arcs that have the exact same center and same radius. Over here, I have different line segments that are all different colors. This is a polyline that has different widths. So all of this can be taken into account with the overkill command. So again, coming here to the overkill, I'm going to go ahead and select all of these objects and hit a return. And I'm going to uncheck that one for the moment, but it has this ability to combine linear objects or concentric objects, and I'll go ahead and hit OK. So we understood that we had over 1,100 objects in this file, and when all is said and done, now if I click on this, click on these objects, we'll find that I now have 15. So, okay, that's a lot better than 1,100, but still it didn't join these objects that are, let me move that out of the way a little bit, these objects that are collinear. So I'm going to go ahead and just come back to one screen. I don't need that side screen any longer. Get that back. And so I'm going to use the overkill command once more and just point out that it is possible to ignore things like color or layer or line type. Any of these things could be keeping those collinear objects, which maybe my intent was they should all be one, but they're all separate. So I'll go ahead and just ignore the color in this scenario, hit OK, and we can see now that I do, in fact, all of them turn red because they're, in fact, here only one object, one line, and that was the first object created of the many in the data set, and all of the others were added to it. So overkill allows us to do that. We'll come back to another command that's very similar to that in just a bit, but the overkill was the simplest way, I believe, to interact with your file and help and clean up some of these things. Now, some of the other things that are possible, I'll scroll down here a little bit. Purge. Now, I'm going to hover on Purge for just a moment. Actually, that's not giving me a description, so I'll go ahead and click on it. And this brings up the dialog box. So when I type Purge or when I pick Purge off the menu, I will get the dialog box. And what this does is it gets rid of items that are in the file that are not in the actual on the screen. They're in the file, maybe layers that are empty, line types that are not assigned to anything, blocks that are in the file but are not physically in the drawing, not on the screen itself. So I can get rid of these things via the purge command. Now, I do want to point out, by default, I believe this installs like this: confirm each item to be purged. I don't wish to confirm each item, and purge nested. And the purge nested is very important, because if that's not set that way, if it's set unchecked, I want to point out, I could hit the purge all, and it's going to tell me that it's going to purge. I'm going to say, yeah, purge all the checked items. And then I can see that the purge all button is still active. I can still select it again. And then I run this process again. Had this been the other way with purge nested items, I might have deleted a block, which makes a layer available for purging. And then that layer might have a line type assigned to it, because the layer is no longer there. The line type is now purgeable. I don't have to run the command again and again and again. I can just have that check and purge nested items, so that the block that releases the layer and the layer that releases the line type will all be purged in one action. So that can be a way to simplify that. So please notice and make note of these two settings. I don't wish to confirm them, and I wish nested purge. So you should only ever have to hit that button once in order to make that happen. Now, there is a related command. It's called dash purge. And most of you have probably heard of dash purge. I'm going to go ahead and enter it here. It basically, when you enter a command with the dash at the front, that's telling it, don't use any dialog boxes. Let me enter the information at the command prompt. And it does much of the same thing that the purge command does, except for one additional item, and that is this regapps. Now, registered applications are created and stored in files when additional programming, additional list routines or add-on products are added to AutoCAD to do something. And what has happened over time is these regapps, if I copy paste something, let's say I W block out this from this drawing, and I create a new drawing and paste that as a block in that other one, what ends up happening is every registered application in this drawing will end up in my new drawing. If I drag and drop between items, if I grab something from the design center and put it in this file, again, everything from that other file will be, as far as a registered application and the regapp table, will be added to the new file. So it's very possible that you have files that have lots of registered applications. We've seen customers that have not dozens, not hundreds, but literally thousands of regapps in that regapp table that are no longer needed, that are no longer necessary. So when I choose this regapps, it's asking me, which ones do I want to purge? The star is the default. I'll hit a return. Do I wish to verify them? Yes or no. I'm going to say no. And it went through, and here in this case, it removed, and let me hit function F2 here. We can see all of these registered applications that got removed from this file. Relatively simple file, relatively clean, but in fact, it points out down here that it got rid of 33 registered application tables in just this very simple file. So you can imagine, if you have never done that, there's a very high likelihood that you have regapp tables that are significantly large in your system. Now, there are other commands that are related. This command right here, the xref app control, xref app control, yep. I'm going to go ahead and initiate it, and then once again bring up help and point out that in the help system, this talks about if it's set to 0, which is what mine is set to. Down here, you can see that's 0 down at the bottom. It says this is the legacy behavior, and all regapp records are copied to the host. So when I attach something as an xref, all of the registered applications are attached to the host drawing where that X reference is being attached. If that's set to 1, which I'm going to do now, 1, enter, then only the necessary regapps are copied to the host, and usually that means that nothing is copied to the host. So that's a good thing. They're not propagating like they used to. And fortunately, because this stores in the registry, we can see there, you only have to do this once, right? So you don't have to do this again and again and again and check it, but it doesn't hurt. If you jump on a new machine, just understand, well, what's happening with the regapp, and is that going to be propagating information? Now, as I mentioned, there is a command called audit, which is like taking your drawing to a master mechanic, and it says fix errors found. I'll choose yes, please fix them. And it's going to go through and it's going to audit these. Now, remember, there are now very few items left in this file. Had I done this audit prior to removing those things, that audit command would have, again, taken significantly longer, and it would have been a waste of my time, a waste of the company's time, and of course, ultimately a waste of money. So if I look at what did audit do, it went through and passed through all these things. 0 items found, 0 items fixed, so that's a good thing. Now, there are scenarios where you're going to try to open a file and it's not going to be possible. So in that case, you got to take your file to the mechanic. So that's what you need to do first is launch the recover command. So let's scroll down here. There's the recover command. And then what it'll do is it'll allow you to initiate the recover. Then you pick your file that you want to run this process on. So maybe I'll pick one of these, Railroad, and hit open. Now it's going to basically look at the file, fix it first, and then ultimately open it, which may not have been possible. It says no errors found in the database. So that may be a necessary thing. Related to audit, again, that's recover. Now, as we come down here, the audit will occasionally create phantom parcels. And all you have to do is run this command. I'll type it or I'll initiate it. And it said 0 unused or hidden parcels. But occasionally that audit command will create phantom parcels. And we want to run that command. So I'm going to point it out here. It's the clear phantom parcels command. And it did, in fact, find 0. But just know that it exists. And it doesn't hurt to run it from time to time because it doesn't take long. But you want to be confident that you don't have any of those. And then I'll point out the map clean command, coming back over here to the sample drawing. Map clean is similar to the overkill, but here, as I select all of these items to run this utility on, I'm not going to go through all of this because there's lots of options, but as I choose next, you can see we can specify what do we want to do. Delete duplicates, and it has a tolerance, just like the overkill does. Maybe I want to check for objects, 0 length objects, add that. Maybe I want to weed polylines, and I want to have a tolerance for all of these things. So all of these different options are possible. I can do them one at a time. I can do them all in one shot, and then ultimately get through to the end. So if I choose finish, then it tells me what did it do, what did it modify, and I know for a fact that command, the way I have it set up, it modified my circle into not being a circle. Okay, so those are some of the very common commands. Now we're going to get into other tools that are possible. Now, for people that interact with either the Autodesk Construction Cloud or BIM 360, they commonly have the desktop connector up and running. And as a part of the desktop connector, there is this item called the Reference Explorer. So I'm going to bring this up. I'm going to drag it off the screen for just a moment, but talk about how that Reference Explorer works. Now, in this file, if I bring up the xref, oh, it's already present here, the xreference manager, it tells me that there are the file that I'm in, it's opened, plus all these other are references. And then there are some images. One of them says needs reloading here. A little bit better view understanding is the tree view, because what I'll see is that this file has city limits attached, and this file has city limits attached. So ultimately, I'm getting city limits in here twice because of the referencing structure of this particular file. So this can be an important thing. Maybe I want to go back to this file and not have this be an attachment, but have it be an overlay. So it doesn't take it with the second file with it everywhere that it exists. So that can be an important consideration. Now, if I close this file altogether, let's close that file, and I'll bring back the reference manager. Similar, it's possible to do the exact same thing, but without opening the file. So what I'll choose here is I'll point to the file, opening it inside this environment. I'll say La Habra All and choose open, but without actually opening the file, it's going to analyze all of the references and tell me about them. So there's the list view, the exact same list view I had in the other one. And then there's the tree view, which tells me about some of these, the nature of these files. And it's even telling me this other file La Habra Streets is referencing La Habra All, which is the file that I'm in, which means it has a circular reference. So this can be an important way to understand, not just that I have extra files, but the fact that I have circular references is a part of this entire process, which can help me manage my files and make sure that I'm not bringing across extra data when I shouldn't. Okay, so that's a tool. Now, separately, there is a tool. I'll close that one and come back to the other file that I had open. There is a tool that some of our customers utilize from our largest organizations. They contact Autodesk Consulting, which will look at all of their files in all of their network drives, all of their systems, and then run reports on this. Again, these is something that our largest organizations would pay for when they have really large projects, really important data, just a tremendous amount of it, and they're willing to pay for a service to analyze that. I'll just show a little bit of what the results can look like down here, where they get a report that tells them how long are the files typically open, what are their file sizes, what are the registered application tables, how long would it take to purge and audit all of these commands, and then also, very importantly, what is causing these things? Is it a particular file that is bringing up issues? Is it a particular user that has more of these types of problem files, right? In which case we probably want to address that with training. So all of this can be understood at the very largest scale. Now, this is not something that most organizations would typically buy or can afford, perhaps even, but this is an option. Now, at the other end of the scale, for smaller organizations, there are tools that can be bought online where for $45, it can do much of what I talked about all in one pass. Do a purge, do an audit, do a reg app recovery, fix duplicates, and do all of these things in one shot. And it's a low-cost item, right? So again, those are just three types of tools: the reference manager, this paid for service, or tools that are bought online that can always assist with that. So if I come back to my PowerPoint, let's come back to here, I believe. Then we talked about some of the commands that are possible. We've talked about why it's so very important to do that. And unfortunately, as I mentioned, this is done less frequently than it should be. And particularly, things like block libraries should be analyzed as well. Some blocks I've seen are still old versions of blocks and need to be audited and purged as well, because not just the drawings, but if I go back in and reach to some of these things, it's important to do that. So I'm going to pause for a moment and see if there's any outstanding questions, gentlemen.
Hey, Angel, I think we've been keeping up with those. I think we're in pretty good shape.
Fantastic. So if any of you would like to have a follow-up one-on-one conversation, please state that in the chat window. And on behalf of Jerry, Alan, Jeff, myself, we thank you for attending. We're super appreciative of, let's see, there we go. In just a few weeks, there's going to be another set of these. April 14th, Cracking the Code on Civil 3D Code Set Styles by Jeff. April 28th, Working with Property Set Data in Civil 3D by Jerry. May 12th, Grading Fun with Feature Lines by Alan. And on May 26th, 3-line profiles, how they stack up, by myself. So with that, I want to thank you once again, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye.